Okay, here we go. So we learned the Mishnah on Daf Samach Amud Aleph, and there was one line in the Mishnah that we were focusing on, and it said Nosnoi Chutz L'Tchum, which we touched as if you put the Erev out of the the perimeter of the city, Afilu Ama Achas, even if it was out of the city by one Amma, Ma Sheniskar Humapsu. Whatever he benefits on one side, he loses on the other side. So to illustrate that, we use a rubber band and a moret. Let's see, I have my moret here and my rubber band. Perfect. So here is the city, and I put my air one tefach out of the city. So I get 2,000 amas in this direction. Since I get 2,000 amas in this direction, I benefited one amma, because had I measured from the city, I would only get 2,000 amas from the city. Now an amma out. On the other hand, in this direction, I only lose one amma. So if my Erev was the city, I would have been now 2,000 amas. Now that I made it on the other side of the city, I get only 1,999 amas. So the Gemara points out that it seems like the entire city doesn't count for anything, that he gets free. So he gets one amma here and 1,999 amas past the city, but the whole city he gets for free. And that's what the Gemara is discussing, because the Gemara had a brisa that says that you don't get anything for free. You just count 2,000 amas from wherever your Erev was. And the Gemara wants to know, where do you find such a concept that you get free amas because of the fact that your city is incorporated into the Erev? And the Gemara quotes from Rav Ada quotes, or is it Rav Idi? Rav Idi quoted a halacha that Rabbi Shua ben Levi was machadish, and this is the halacha that the Gemara is talking about. Hayamoided uva. You were measuring, you placed your Erev, and now you were measuring your perimeter of 2,000, your radius of 2,000. The cholsa midasa, the chatzia, and your 2,000 amas ended in the middle of a city. Ein loy el chatzia. Then that's all you get. You wherever that 2,000 amma radius is, that's your cutoff. You cannot walk past that place. But kol midasa, the seifa here. What if you had 2,000 amas and there was a small city that was only 1,000 amas, that was totally incorporated within the 2,000 amas? Then nasas loya ir kula kedal amas. The entire city, we look at it like it's only dalar amas, and therefore he gets it for free. Umashlimin loy es hashar. So when you're counting the 2,000 amas, the city is free, and you just add the amas from between your Erev and the city, and then you continue on after the other end of the city, but the city you get for free. And on that, Rabbi Idi said, "Ein elu el different nevius." This is different nevius because there's no swear for it. Mali kolza b'chatzia ir, mali kolza b'sayter. Why should it make a difference? Either the city I get for free, or I don't get it for free. Why would you say I get the city for free if my 2,000 amas completely incorporates the city? Yet if the Erev ends in the middle of the city, if the 2,000 amas ends in the middle of the city, then I don't get any free linear footage from the city. And the answer to this is the subject of this Gemara. Amarava Tarvayotanu. What if I told you that we actually have a Mishnah that will support both these halachas? Halacha A is that if the Erev ends in the middle of the city, you don't get any free amas. And if the Erev incorporates, if the 2,000 amas incorporates the whole city, then you get the whole city for free.
Well, that's a big city, 2,000 amas. It's a little city.
That's right. A little city, you'll get it for free. If it's a big city, you don't get it for free. And it's funny that you bring up big city, little city, because that is our next Mishnah where we learn all this from. So the very next Mishnah that we're going to be learning says, Anshe Ir Gedolah. What if you had a large city that's 10,000 amas in diameter, and it's sitting right near a small city that's only 1,000 amas in diameter. So the halacha is Anshe Ir Gedoyla Nahalchenes Kolir Katana. The big city. So let's make believe this is my big city, and let's make believe that this is my small city, and let's say that 2,000 amas includes this. So if I live in my big city, I get a big 2,000 amma radius. Means it includes this. That's what the Mishnah says. Anshe Ir Gedoyla Nahalchenes Kolir Katana. They can walk through the entire small city. Now, if you think about that, why does the Mishnah need to tell me that? If the small city is within its 2,000 amma radius, do I need a Mishnah to tell me that I can carry in the city? It's within the 2,000 amma radius. So Rashi tells us it must be that the Mishnah is trying to tell us an additional chiddush, and that is that this city doesn't count. So when you count the 2,000 amas in this direction, you count 1,000 amas to the city, and another 1,000 amas past the city, and the city doesn't count at all. And that's what this Mishnah must be telling us. Anshe Ir Gedoyla, Mahalchin is Kolir Katana. So that's telling us one chiddush of Reb Shua ben Levi, that if the 2,000 amas totally includes the city, you get the city for free. And then the next line of the very next Mishnah that we're about to learn is the Ein Anshe Ir Katana Mahalchin es Kolir Gedoyla. Again, you have a big city that's right near a small city. This is 10,000 amas. So this small city gets a 2,000 amma radius. So if that ends right over here, that's all they can go. They can't go past. So you see the two halachas that are either considered magic, divrei nevios. You see the Mishnah states it pretty clearly. The halacha that if you end in the middle of the city, you can't go further is explicit. And the other halacha that if your 2,000 amas include a whole city, you get the city for free. We make a diak from the ratio of the Mishnah because otherwise there's no chiddush in the halacha that the Mishnah said. So let's just focus for a second on the Lashon of Mishnah. The Lashon of Mishnah is, here it says, Anshe Ir Gedoyla Mahalchin, and the Ein Anshe Ir Katana Mahalchin. So it's Anshe, the Ein Anshe. Zok the Gemara my time. What's the svara? What's the reasoning for these two halachas in the Mishnah? Lav Mishum, would it not be the Hani Kol Sumidasan the Chatzia here? The little city, the small city, when you measure the 2,000 amas, it ends in the middle of a big city. The Hani, but when you're measuring the radius of 2,000 amas from the big city, Kol Sumidasan beside here. It totally encloses and includes the small city, and therefore the small city, you don't count its footage and you can extend your range on that side. Well, Ravidi said that it's nevuos. So obviously Ravidi didn't think that you could learn this chiddush of Rabbi Shua ben Levi from our Mishnah. He called it divrei nevuah. So how is he going to understand our Mishnah where you don't see this chiddush? Ravidi anshe told me. It doesn't say ein anshe. It says anshe, which means both included. It says anshe Ir Gedoyla. Anshe Ir Gedoyla. Mahalchin es kol Ir Katana. And Anshe Ir Katana Mahalchin kol Ir Gedoyla. So both people could do it. Anshe Now, it doesn't make sense to say that, because how could you say that Anshe Ir Katana include the whole big city? But Umaykum Benoisen, he's not learning the Mishnah speaking where you placed your Eruv and now you're measuring how far you can go. Rather, he's talking about if you placed your Eruv, meaning if you live in the small city and you place your Eruv in the big city, you're now allowed on Shabbos to go around the whole big city. On the other hand, if you live in a big city and you placed your Eruv in the small city, again, you can walk around the whole small city. That's our Ravidi learns it. And therefore, it's not even discussing the shayla that we had about when you're measuring the range of how much space you have and the 2,000 amas ends, what happens if that's the middle of a city? That's not even part of the discussion of the Mishnah. So there's no raya to Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's halacha from the Mishnah at all. Al-Moeded like not. So you're suggesting that the next Mishnah that we discussed does not address the issue at all of how you measure the 2,000 hours. Are you actually saying that the Mishnah doesn't address that? But Faknan, that very same Mishnah continues on. And that very same Mishnah mentions another Allah. And it says, Ulamoide Cha'amru, and someone who's measuring the 2,000 amas from a city, you give him 2,000 amas, Shafilu Soif Midasai, Kala B'Mayra, even if his 2,000 amas ends in middle of a cave, he may not go further. It's a 2,000 amma cutoff. So the problem is you clearly see at least half of what Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi said, and that is when you measure 2,000 amas, if it ends up at the 2,000 amas, it's not in the middle of a cave. You could only go up to your 2,000 amas, and you can't spread out into the rest of the cave. So you can easily be medayik from there. If it included the whole cave, then maybe you would get it for free. Zok Gemara, no. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is still telling us a chiddush, and he couldn't have relied on just the Mishnah telling us this. And indeed, Rabbi Idi, who says it's different nevuah, could also say that this chiddush of the fact that if your 2,000 amas incorporates the whole city, you get that for free. You don't see that from our Mishnah. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi is telling us that. That's soifa ir it's trichaloi. The like none. Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi's chiddush is a chiddush that's not found in the Mishnah, and that is his halacha where if your 2,000 amas incorporates a whole city, that city does not use up your range, and you can extend your range up to 2,000 amas, excluding the amas of the city. So now, in fact, we have two ways to learn the next Mishnah. It's either speaking about moeded throughout, or it's speaking about moiser. It's either speaking about if you put your Erev in a city, could you be in the whole city? Or it's speaking about when you're measuring 2,000 amas and your amas ends in the middle of the city. So Omar Ibn Nachman, the Gemara is going to give us a better understanding of the Mishnah according to either pshat. The Gemara is going to help us understand the Mishnah. So Omar Ibn Nachman, man detani anshi loy mistavish, the mandomer, like Rabbi Idi, who learns anshe, and doesn't say the ein anshe, it takes out the word the ein. It makes perfect sense. Why is that? The mukim lo, man detani anshe loy mistavish, the man detani ein anshe. And if you go to the ein anshe irkatana, also loy mistavish. They're both legitimate ways of understanding the Mishnah. Mandatani anshe loy mistavish. The mandomer who learns anshe, he's not making a mistake. The mukim lo benoisi. He's going to say, like we said before, that the Mishnah is talking about if people of a big city put their Erev in a small city, they have the whole small city, plus 2,000 amas around that. And if the people in a little city put their Erev in a big city, and they're Kodesh in the big city, they get the whole big city and 2,000 amas around that. And the people who learned, like Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi originally learned this Mishnah, of Ein Anshe, Lo Mishtabish. It's not a mistake, it makes perfect sense. The Mukim Lo B'Moeded. It's speaking about when you have an Erev and you're measuring your 2,000 amas. And let's elaborate a little bit on the understanding of the Mishnah. Anshe Ir Gedoyla, Mahalchin, Eskol Ir Ketan. The people in a big city, that their Erev includes the whole small city, meaning the 2,000 amma range that they have includes the whole small city. They have the whole small city and they don't use up any range. But if they're in a small city and their range does not include the whole big city, it only includes part of the big city, then they have to stop wherever their 2,000 amas is used up. This halacha, that there's a difference between if the whole city is incorporated or not in the 2,000 amas, it applies to a person who placed an Erev somewhere, and now he's measuring his 2,000 amma range. But if someone lives in the big city, and he placed his air in the Irkatana, meaning he wants to be Kohen Shvisa in the Irkatana, or Haya be Irkatana, meaning he wanted to be Kohen Shvisa in the big city. In Halachas Kula, in either case, you are allowed to go through the entire city, whether it's the big city or the little city, depending on where you are Kohen Shvisa. And in either city that you were Kohen Shvisa, you also have an additional 2,000 amma range around each city. Zok the head of Gemara Baita. Amar Yosef, Amar Rabbi Bar Abba, Amar Afuna. Imagine you have a house that's on the Scarborough Bluffs, right at the edge of the Scarborough Bluffs. It's right at the edge of a big, big drop. Very, very dangerous to let your children play in your backyard. It's actually dangerous just to stroll in the backyard. One wrong move and you fall to your azazel. There's a very famous way in Israel of cursing people. It's called lech lazazel. This is the type of house that you can buy if you want a lech lazazel. So it says over here, if there's a 4 amma fence, if there's a 4 amma, that's about 8 feet. If you have an 8-foot high fence around your property to protect somebody from chas v'sholom falling into that canyon, following down that mountain, that means this is a proper city because people live there properly without worry because they're protected by this barrier. And therefore, we say that the entire neighborhood is one big city, and therefore, moedin in law misfas hanacha. You could measure the 2,000 amma range that people in that neighborhood, in that city have from the edge of the mountain cliff, because that's where the city ends, by the mountain cliff. However, vimla, if there's no fence around this community, that's not called a normal community, because no one could properly live and settle in an area that's subject to such a great danger. And therefore, we look at it like a temporary encampment. And if you remember, we learned if there's a whole bunch of tents set up in the wilderness, we don't look at it like a city. Rather, each tent is considered its own dalet amas, and each person measures 2,000 amas from his tent. He doesn't get to have the whole area that he's in, the whole city for free, because that's not called a city. So just like a tent city is not called a city that doesn't have proper safety and proper barriers is not a normal place where people can permanently live, and therefore a moed in the law, elami pesach beisai. Each house, if you're in your house and you're Kohen Shvisa for Shabbos, you have 2,000 amas from your house, but you're not part of the community because it's not called a community if people are scared to even leave their house because they can chas v'sholom fall off. Amar le Abaye. Abaye said it's funny because up until this point, when we were talking about a fence, we always said it's got to be at least 4 tvachim. We had earlier with the fence to make yourself a private entrance to leave when we had a 2-story house, and we wanted to know that these people aren't going to ruin the hiluch of the lower people, so they had a private gate. So it used the word dakar arba, which was referring to 4 tvachim. Abaye said here, Abaye dakar arba amas amrit. You're talking here about 4 amas. So my question to you, Frank Abaye, is Ma'ishna b'kol dakar de alma. Why is it that all the other dakas that the Gemara discusses as a requirement, it's always referring to a barrier that's all of 4 tvachim, and suddenly here you're talking about a daka and you now need 4 amas? Amarle, of course. Hasam loy be'izet tashmishta. When we were talking about having a separate entrance and a separate gate in between 2 communities, that's no one's afraid to use it. It's just to show that we're severed from one another. But over here, there's a fear of using these homes if there's a danger that people can fall off the cliff. And therefore, in this case, in fact, the shear is different, and you do need 4 amas, because without a tall, strong barrier, it cannot be considered a community. Over here, they'd be afraid to use it unless there was a safety barrier put up. Okay, Zok Ta'ela Gemara, Omer Yosy, Mino Aminola. Where did I get this chiddush that you need to have a big, strong gate if you're living on the edge of a fall of a precipice. And if you don't have that gate, it's not considered a community. The Tanya we learned, hit the Rebbe. Rebbe was matter. Shiyu b'negeder yard m'chamton ve'in b'nechamton oiden l'geder. There were two cities that were built on the mountainside. Geder was a city higher up on the mountainside, and below it there was the city of Chamson that was on the mountainside. Now, when you looked at them, I'm going to go to the diagram on 61A1 because it gives us some dimensions. From the edge of Geder, if you wanted to go downhill, of course, if you live in a community, no matter where in the community you live, you're entitled to 2,000 amas from the edge of your community. So if you would count 2,000 amas, and look again, we're not measuring down the slope, we're measuring straight, because that's how you measure when it comes to Tchumen. It's inclusive of the whole city of Chamson, which means anybody in the city of Geder could walk anywhere in the city of Chamson. But that's because Geder, which was on a cliff, this is a very dangerous area to live in, there was a very strong barrier here. And since there was a strong barrier here, this was a community because people lived there freely. They weren't constantly afraid of falling off a cliff. And since it's a whole community, even if you live at the far end of the community, you're entitled 2,000 amas from the edge of your community, and therefore you can go anywhere in Chamson because it would be within your range. The problem is the people in Chamson did not have a proper gate. And since they didn't have a proper gate, we didn't consider this a community. And since we don't consider this a community, every house is for himself. So if somebody lives over here, sure, he can travel through all of Geder. But if someone lives on the far side of Chamson, he can't start measuring from the edge of Chamson. He has to measure from his own house because we don't consider Chamson a proper community. And therefore, since he only has 2,000 numbers from his house, he probably cannot go through Geder. He might only be able to get to the outskirts or just the beginning of Geder. So that's where you see that you're not considered a community unless the community is protected. So let's look at this again. Where did Rabbi Yosef get it from? He got it from this halacha that Rebbe said. Here the Rebbe, the yard mechamson, my time. Why in the world would Rebbe have such an unusual halacha that people who live in the upper city can go through the entire lower city on Shabbos, but people who live in the lower city on Chamson cannot go up to the upper city? What possible explanation can there be for such an anomaly? Lav Mishum, the only thing that I could suggest is the Hani Avadaka. The people of Geder built a proper barrier, and therefore they're considered a community. And therefore anybody in that community could measure 2,000 amas from the outer wall of their community, and that would be inclusive of their tchum. But the Hani Lo Avadaka, the people in Chamson, they didn't build a proper fence. And therefore every house in that community is an independent place, and you're only allowed to go 2,000 amas from your door. And that's where I got this from, that when the community lives at the edge of danger, they have to have a proper barrier. If not, we consider them a tent city. He also Rav Dini Omar. Rav Dini said, you've totally got this wrong. Rebbe was not even talking about Tchum Shabbos. It had nothing to do with Tchum Shabbos. The problem is there were Chayes Ruins that were living in Geder. Mercenaries, gangsters, robbers, and they would always go beat the living daylights and kill the people of Chamson. There's literally gangsters living there. So let's see what he did to try to preserve life and to stop brawls from breaking out. And he said, Yosy bin Omar, Tatrugi metatrigi lahu v'negeder of Chamson. The people from Geder, they would go down to Chamson and they would beat them to death. Now, I said it wrong. What I should have said was, if a member of the Chamson community would climb up the mountain to visit Geder, then they would lynch him. They would beat the living daylights out of him. So because of that, Rebbe said the people of Chamson are tame. If they get visitors from Geder, they'll treat them civilly. So we can let people from Geder go to Chamson on Shabbos. But we will not let people from Chamson go to Geder on Shabbos because they're going to beat them to death. And we need to avoid these things. So listen to this. If you think we have a drinking problem in the Aguda and it makes people act too rowdy, or you think there's kiddish clubs around the world that make people act rowdy, you ain't seen nothing yet. Let's look at this command. Umay hitter, what does it mean? Rebbe was matter them to go. Al means his kid. He made out the kona that the Bnei Chamzon may not visit the city of Geder on Shabbos, but the Bnei Geder may visit the city of Chamzon on Shabbos. Umay shno Shabbos. If any time a person comes to Chamzon goes together, they're going to beat him to death. So why are we only concerned about him traveling here on Shabbos? In Geder, they have Gishmak and Kiddush clubs, and people would drink a lot on Shabbos, and they would get rowdy and fun. And then a guy from Chamzon would come up, they were drunk, then they would beat him to death. The rest of the week, they were sober, so they were able to contain their hatred and not kill people. But on Shabbos, when you drink too much, sometimes you can go too far. And because of that, Rebbe had to make a gzeira that the Bnei Chamzon should not go together on Shabbos, because since they drank too much, they might be beaten up. I don't know what they were drinking, but it couldn't have been Crown Royal. Ki ozli lahasa. When so frek the Gemara, ki ozli lahasa nami metatri gelu. So if you're telling me the people of Geder are gangsters and they're going to beat people from Chamzon to death, so why are you outlining only one way people from Chamzon going together? Why did you outlaw people from Geder to go to Chamzon? Because the people from Geder can go on the offensive and they can go to Chamzon and attack somebody in Chamzon. So Gemara, Kalba Bloimasya Shev Shnin Loinova. A dog out of his city, out of his natural habitat, out of his familiar territory, for 7 years he won't bark. Meaning, if you change schools or you change neighborhoods, even though you were a wild animal in your original shul, for 7 years till you get comfortable, you can drink to your heart's delight because you're probably going to behave. But after 7 years, when you're really comfortable, that's when it's dangerous. So the point is, since if the Bnei Geder go to Chamzon, they're out of their element, they're out of their natural habitat. We're not worried that they'll beat up the Bnei Chamzon. But if Chamzon go together, then they can get hit by a lynch mob. Zog to Gemara, Hashtanami metatrgi Bnei Chamzon livnei Geder. Now the Bnei Chamzon don't like the Bnei Geder because they've killed many of their fellow city members. They hate. I mean, if Bnei Geder kills somebody from Chamzon every time he shows up together, I'm sure if someone from Geder comes to Chamzon, they're going to want to get some revenge. So how could you allow people from Geder to come to Chamzon? They're going to beat them up. So Gemara, no. Kula hai loy kaifelu. I understand someone from Geder in Chamzon is not in his element, so he won't go on the attack. But he's not a wimp either, and he's not going to be beaten up by them. So if someone attempts to attack Geder, the guy from Geder will get his strength back, and he will defend himself. So therefore, they only outlawed people going from Chamzon together. But I'll call upon him. It has nothing to do with this halacha of tchumen, with a barrier is required to make something into a community. It has nothing to do with that.
I don't believe that there were such people, unless they were goyim.
It's hard to believe it.
No, I think they were going.
And I can't accept it as you should speak
But it's not only on Shabbos because they're drinking. Goyim drink more on Shabbos?
No, Sunday. But not Shabbos.
This takana was only made on Shabbos.
I don't know. It doesn't sound Yiddish.
I can't disagree with that. It doesn't sound Yiddish, but that's what it says. Shabbos, the shchicha b'shikris, so they're going to beat people up. I don't know.
According to the Steinsaltz, it was goyim.
Who says that it was going? Steinsaltz says they were going?
Yeah.
So what does it have to do with Shabbos? And why would they listen?
No, to protect the Jews to go.
No, but it says, but the kana was B'nai Geder Yordan Chamzon. Rebbe allowed B'nai Geder to go to Chamzon. The B'nai Geder to go in, don't give two hoots. What Rebbe said.
Maybe. Yeah. You're right. But I guess
Must be-
Steinsaltz
it
had the
must be
same
right.
problem as Mr. First.
The kashas are very good. I don't know the answer. I don't know the answer. I
It's
don't know.
red.
Have you ever been in Satmar when the Aronis and the Zalman Leibis were fighting? If you were there once, you'd have a better shot in the Gemara.
Wasn't Rebbe hooked up with the government over there? Maybe he had some power over there.
So you mean the Takana wasn't halachic Takana, it was a government, could be. This is what the Gemara says. You know, my brother once had to be taken in, and not all, she didn't always follow the rules to the T. My brother once, going back many years ago, he was taken in by a tzollah to the hospital on Simchas Torah in Brooklyn, the Borough Park. So he's lying there in the ambulance, and they're taking him to Maimonides, and on the radio, he hears, Ganki, bist du? So he says, ja, was braucht er? He says, ich bin du bei Berel. Oh, hat gelegt, a Kiddush, a Simchas Torah Kiddush, Halibjes, mit Zing, mit Kigel, miskimmen. So he says, okay, ich drop auf mein patient, ich kim bald the river. Could be, it's a maximum. So, the
What Mechi said, that's how it explains it here. It was not a halachic ruling. It was an ordinance instituted to protect the public welfare.
So it had nothing to do with Yiddishkeit. He got the government to make such a rule.
Yeah.
But it had to be needed. It still had to be eaten, because otherwise, what did it have to do with Shabbos?
I think going like Friday night Shabbos. That's their day off usually. It's
okay.
It's very possible.
Maybe the bar is very important.
Could be.
They all work for Jews.
Very good. Okay, so let's think more about here. We have two other pshatim in this takana, which goes back to make it a halachic issue. Reb Safra and the next one are very similar. Safra me'ir harasuya kekeshes havoy. It was an ir asuya kekeshes. And if you remember, we learned that if you have a city that's in the shape of a bow, if there's more than 4,000 amas from either leg of what I call the horseshoe, you don't put the imaginary string there, which means the edge of the city is the actual bow. So let's have a look. If this is the people of Geder, and you measure from their outer perimeter 2,000 amas, it will be inclusive of the entire city of Khamsin, because the entire city of Khamsin is within 2,000 amas of the edge of the city of Geder. But on the flip side, when you're measuring from Khamsin, if you live up here, you can get to all of Geder. But if you live in the center of the bow, your 2,000 amas will not cover you to the end of Geder. And that's what Rav meant. Rav meant that the people of Geder can walk through the entire city of Khamsin, but the city of Khamsin, depending on where in Khamsin you live, you wouldn't be able to go through the entire city of Geder, because if you lived here and you walk this way, we measure your 2,000 amos from here, and the 2,000 amos will not be inclusive of the entire city of Geder. So that's how Reb Safra learned. So it was a logic psak. But again, you don't have a raya about anything to do with barriers. And Rav Dimi Bar Chanina Amar Anshi Ir Gedoyla Anshi Ir Katana Havoy. It was exactly like the case that we just learned in our Mishnah, that people who lived in a big city, the 2,000 amos totally included the small city, but the people who lived in the small city, so Khamsin was a smaller city, their 2,000 amos ended in the middle of Geder, therefore the people of Khamsin couldn't walk through all of Geder. So it's the same idea with a different configuration. So Rav Safra's teretz and Rav Dimi's pshat are really the same idea, using a different example and a different configuration. Rav Kana was the one who attributed the answer of Keshes to Rav Safra and the answer of Ir Gedoyla and Ir Katana to Rav Dimi Bar Chanina. But Rav Tevyumi wasn't sure who said what. Rav Timi Matni Hochi, Rav Safra or Rav Dimi Bar Chanina. I know that I heard a pshat from Rav Safra, and I know that I heard a pshat from Dimi Bar Chanina. One of them said that Khamsin was in the shape of a bow. I don't know who said what. So they both are quoting the same two pshatim. One knew exactly who said what, and the one just knew that between these two rabbonim, these two pshatim came out. And let's start the next Mishnah, the Heilige Mishnah. This is the Mishnah that we just discussed. Anchi ir gedola, mahalchenes kol ir ketana, v'anchi ir ketana, mahalchenes kol ir gedola. We already learned in our Mishnah, in our Gemara just today, earlier, two different pshatim on this Mishnah. Is this Mishnah talking about placing your Erev, or is it talking about measuring 2,000 amas from your Erev? Ketzah, Mishnah haya be'ir gedola. Somebody was living in a big city. And he placed his Erev in the small area, in the small city. Or be'ir katana. Someone lived in a small city. And he placed his Erev in a big city. So the halach is mahalach is kula v'chutzala al pa'imam. He could walk around the entire city in which he was kodesh visa, and then from that city he has a 2,000 amma radius all the way around. Or based on what we learned, I shouldn't use the word around, I should use the word a square, all the way a square, because we make every city into a square. Rabbi Kiva says, Ein loy elami mokem iruvei al paiman. He disagrees with all we learned from Torah. There's no such thing that if you're kodesh shvis in the city, you automatically have the whole city, and you're like someone who lives in that city. No, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev, which means if you place your Erev in the center of a city that was 10,000 amas, you can't even walk around the whole city. Omer l'hen Rabbi Kiva. So Rabbi Kiva told the Chachamim, who obviously argued and said, if you put your Erev in the city, you automatically have the whole city and 2,000 amas around it. He told them as follows: would you not agree to me? If you didn't place your Erev in a city, you placed your Erev in a cave. There you would agree that you only have 2,000 amas from your Erev, and you don't get the whole cave plus 2,000 amas around the cave. So I told him, of course, there we agree with you, but there's a reason why. A cave is not a city; it's an abandoned, empty shell. That's not something that you automatically get the whole city. You only get your Makam Erev and your Dalet Amas, and the 2,000 amas is measured from your Dalet Amas. Well, yes, the urine, but if you're in an area, let's say you're in a cave that's populated and it's full, then in fact, Mahalach is Kula. You'd be able to get a whole cave. That would be your Makam or your Kodesh visa, and then the Chutzul Al Pai Mama, and you would measure around the 2,000 amas just like a city. A cave in the city is the same. It all depends on if it's inhabited. If it's inhabited, we look at it as one big entity, one big Dalet Amas, and then you get the 2,000 amas in addition to all that area. And if it's not inhabited, then your Dalet Amas is what your Shvisa is, and you get 2,000 amas from where you are. Nimsa, so if you think about it, this is really fascinating. Nimsa kal toicha me'al gava. If you're in a cave, you could place your Erev inside the cave, and you also have the option to place your Erev. You also have the option to place your Erev.
It's okay there, with the.
You also have the option to place your Erev inside the cave. So think about it. If you put your Erev inside the cave and there's inhabitants in the cave, you're going to get the whole cave for free, plus 2,000 amas of radius around the whole cave. But if you put the Erev on top of the cave, where nobody's living there, it's the middle of a wilderness, then you only get 2,000 amas from your actual Erev. So it's a fascinating thing. You're in exactly the same location. The only difference is the elevation. Are you at ground level or are you inside the cave? And you'll have two different ranges, because inside the cave is inhabited, so you get the whole cave for free. But outside the cave is not inhabited. That's one halacha. Now a new halacha. Ulamoid shavru, and someone who's already placed it there, and now he's measuring the 2,000 amas. It doesn't make a difference where your 2,000 amma range ends. Even if it's in the middle of a cave, you stop there. So it's juxtaposing the two things. If you place your Erev in a cave, in an inhabited cave, then you automatically have the whole cave for free, and then you have 2,000 amas around it. But if you put your Erev outside of the cave, and your 2,000 amma range in the middle of the cave, there you only get your 2,000 amas. You don't get to go past your 2,000 amas just because the 2,000 amas ended inside a cave. And it's the same thing with the city. If your 2,000 amma ends inside a city, we learned as well, you have to stop there. Okay, so ahead of the Gemara.
I thought we learned that you use that city. I mean, if it's a small city on the outside and a big city.
If your 2,000 amas includes the entire city, if your 2,000 amas includes the entire city, then we'll actually extend your 2,000 amas past the city, like Rabbi Shimon said. But if the 2,000 amas ends in the middle of the city, you only get your 2,000 amas and not an inch more.
Okay.
Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. So let's just review this machlokes we had between Rabbi Kiva and the Chacham. Rabbi Kiva said, even if you put your Erev in an inhabited place, in the middle of the city, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. You don't get the city for free. While the Tanakama of our Mishnah said that if you place your Erev in a city, you get the whole city for free. And in addition to the city, you get an additional 2,000 amas. So just to clarify a little more, the Chachamim holds, the Tanakama holds that when you put your Erev in a city, you're treated exactly like any other resident in the city. You live in the city. Just like any resident in the city, automatically can walk through the whole city, and he gets a 2,000 amma range from the city. When you place your Erev in the city, you have the status of a resident. Rabbi Kiva argued and said, no, when you place your Erev in the city, you don't have the status of a resident. You have the status of an alien who has Dalet Amas there. And therefore, you're not entitled to the whole city. You get 2,000 amas from your Makom Erev. Zok tehet Gemara. Amar Rabbi Yehuda Amar Shmuel. Shabas be'ir charev. What if you parked? So this doesn't mean you place your Erev. You physically parked in an empty city. Rashi tells us what an ir charev is. It's midiyura. Midiyura. No one lives in there. It's an abandoned city. So you're there by yourself. But it still has its walls. So the city is still intact. It's just that nobody lives there anymore, and you park there. L'Rabbanon, according to the Rabbanon, mahalach eskula, you'd be able to live in the entire city. You can walk around that entire city because you're koine shvisa, you become a resident of that city. And like any other resident of a city, you have a 2,000 amma range. But what if you didn't go there yourself? Rather, he niach as a ruvai the ir chareva. You weren't there when Shabbos arrived. You sent an erev tchum, you put there. You weren't there yourself. Then ein loy nimakem a ruvai ella alpayim amma. You only get 2,000 amma. So this is an interesting point. If you actually park there, then we consider you a resident. But if you only placed your Erev there, then you're not a resident. You only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. Rabbi Lazar says, Echad Shavas, the Echad Iniach. There's no difference between whether or not you park there yourself or whether you put an Erev. Because putting an Erev is just like parking there yourself. Mahalach Eskula, the Chutzala Alpaima. That's this price. Meisvei, the Gemara has a kasha. Amar lahen Rabbi Kiva. Going back to our Mishnah, Rabbi Kiva argued with Eruvin and made a point. Don't you agree to me that you only get from your Makom Erev the notion as a ruvay b'ma'ora she'ein lo mimakom eruvay el al paimam. That was the comment that we just learned from the Mishnah. Rabbi Kiva told the Rabbanim, okay, in a city, I'm not going to fight with you now. But you'll agree with me that if you place your Erev in a cave, you don't get the whole cave for free. Rather, you only get 2,000 amas from where you placed your Erev. And what did the Rabbanim answer? We just learned this in the Mishnah. Amar loy, Eimosai bisman shein badiyurin. I agree with you, Rabbi Kiva, that if you're in a cave and there's no inhabitants there, that you only get from your Makom Erev. So now, Dr. Gemara, Haba ein ba diurin, you see clearly that the Rabbanan responded to Rabbi Akiva and were very clear. And they said that if you're in a cave and no one's living there, moidule, they would agree that you only get 2,000 amas. So, what's the difference between a cave that has no diurin and a city that has no diurin? The Rabbanan hold that if you place your Erev in a city that has no diurin, you don't get the whole city for free. You only get 2,000 amas. So let's go back to Rabbi Lozer. Rabbi Lozer said, Echot Shabbos, ve'echad iniach, mahalach eskula v'chutz al alpayim amma. That's not consistent with the Rabbanan, because we just showed you in the Mishnah that the Rabbanan agree that in an abandoned cave and an abandoned city should be no difference. If you place your Erev, you don't get 2,000 amas from the perimeter of the city. You get 2,000 amas from your Erev, which is exactly what Rabbi Yehuda ben Shmuel said. And he said the Farish, so Rabbi Lezer, how could you say if you put your Erev into an inhabited city, you get the whole city for free? In our Mishnah, the Rabbanan agreed to Rabbi Akiva that in a cave where there's no one living there, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. So Gemara, no, there's a big difference between a cave that has no one living there and an abandoned city that has no one living there. My ein bodiyurin, ein ruyuladira. When the Chachamim in the Mishnah, when the Tanakam in the Mishnah made a concession to Rabbi Akiva that if you put your Erev in a cave, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev, that's because you cannot live in a cave. A cave is uninhabitable. It's not inhabitable. You can't live there. But in a city, even if there's no one there, but it's a city that's inhabitable, and therefore the Rabbanan would not make a concession in the city. If you had a big empty city and you place your Erev in that city, the Rabbanan would hold that the whole city is yours for free, and then you have a 2,000 amma range around the city. A cave, which is uninhabitable, if you put your Erev there, you only get a 2,000 amma radius from your Erev. Okay, so now we made that distinction. According to Rabbi Lozer, we have to make a distinction between an inhabitable space and an uninhabitable space. In an inhabitable space, even though it's empty now, I get the whole space for free, plus the range of 2,000 amas. But if it's uninhabitable, such as a cave, I only get 2,000 amas from my Erev. Toshima. Shavas Be'ir. What if you yourself, you didn't make an Erev, you actually arrived at the city before Shabbos in a city? Afilu higidoyle kantuchya. Even though it's a massive city, like the city of Antuchya. Or what if he spent Shabbos in a cave, in Myra? He showed up to a cave before Shabbos, big massive cave. Afilu he kemaris Tzidkiyo Melech Yehuda, even if it was like the cave of Tzidkiyo, which Rashi says that was the cave. Gedolos was a very large cave. The he sheyotaba Tzidkiyo Laila Yerushalayim Levroich of that custom. When Tzidkiyo escaped Yerushalayim because the custom attacked, he had to abandon the city. He went into a huge cave. The city fell, and he escaped through a massive cave. So even if it's a massive cave, if you yourself parked in that cave Friday evening, then the halacha is mahalach eskula v'chutzala alpayna. You're cutting the whole cave, you're cutting the whole cave, and then you get a 2,000 amma range around. Now notice the cave says that the Bride says that Shabbos. This leniency that you get the entire area of the cave plus 2,000 amas around it is only if you yourself were there, not if you placed an Erev there. So Zoklimar Katani Ir Dumi Demara. The Bride has two cases: a big city and a big cave. Now, we don't know if this city is inhabited or not, but a cave, we know. Ma Mayra Chareva, just like a cave is normally uninhabited, and in our case, Rashi says, we know that the cave of Tzidkiyo is uninhabited, because at the time that the Bryson was written, it was long past the days of Tzidkiyo, so they surely were no one living in that cave anymore. That's what one pshat in Rashi says. And the other pshat in Rashi is that even then, it was uninhabited because it was a place where the king was escaping to. It wasn't a settled area. So just like the cave in the Brisa is uninhabited, Afir Chareva. So too the city that we're discussing is also considered uninhabited. And we can make a dig. V'shavasim, when you have the whole city for free plus a 2,000 amma range, that's if you yourself were there when Shabbos arrived. But if you merely place an Erev there, loy. So you have a kalor raya from this brisa, not like Rabbi Eliezer. Because Rabbi Eliezer told us don't make a distinction. Whether you put your Erev there, whether you were there yourself, you have the full empty cave. And from here you see null again. You see you only get the full empty cave if you were there yourself. But if you place an Erev, you would not get it. Zakta Gemara, money. Before we can ask a kasha on Rabbi Eliezer from this brisa, Rabbi Eliezer only said his halacha in the Rabban, in the Tanakama of our Mishnah. Rabbi Kiva anyway holds that you only get 2,000 amas from where you place your Erev, even in the city. So let's see this brisa we just quoted, who would be the author of the brisa? Mandi. Elena Rabbi Kiva. If you want to suggest that this brisa was written by Rabbi Kiva, then my ear Yechareva. Why would the brisa tell me a case that when the city is in ruins, there you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev, afilu yeshiva nami. Rabbi Kiva holds even a fully inhabited city, if you place your Erev in a full inhabited city, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. You don't get the whole city. So it doesn't make sense that Rabbi Kiva will be the author of this brisa, because if he was the author of this brisa, the brisa would have said a much bigger chiddush. That even if it's inhabited, if you place your Erev there, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. Elav Rabbana. So it must be that the author of this brisa was Rabbana. And now we can ask the Kash and Rabbi Eliezer, the time of the Shabbos. The reason why you get to walk around the whole city, the whole cave, is because you were there yourself when Shabbos arrived. If you merely sent an Erev there and placed an Erev in that uninhabited city or in the uninhabited cave, loy, you would not be able to measure 2,000 amas from the edge of the city. Rather, you would only measure 2,000 amas from your Erev, and that's inconsistent with what the Eliezer said. Don't use the Ma'ira to illustrate for us and to determine for us what the case was, and then you're assuming it's uninhabited. Say for care. Say the case of that brisa is actually fully inhabited. It's a fully inhabited city, and it's a fully inhabited cave. Ma'ir yeshiva, just like the city was settled, Avmar yeshiva was a very settled case. And in this, if it's a settled case, then Rabbi Kiva, and it's not even going according to Rabban, it's going according to Rabbi Kiva. And Rabbi Kiva holds that even if it's a settled place, Rabbi Kiva the Omar, Rabbi Kiva holds even if it's a fully inhabited city or a fully inhabited cave, if you place your Erev there, you don't get to have the whole cave in the whole city for free. You only get 2,000 amas. But if it's Shabbos, but if you yourself parked there and you were there yourself as Shabbos arrived, moidi, then Rabbi Kiva is moidi to the Chachamim that you do get the whole city for free. Correct Gemara, how could you say that this bride is speaking about an inhabited cave? It says it's like the cave of Tzidkiyo, which clearly was not inhabited. We're only comparing it to the cave of Tzidkiyo for specific things. All we're just trying to show that it was a huge cave. That's the meaning of the comparison to the cave of Tzidkiyo. But v'loy kamar Tzidkiyo, we don't literally mean to say that it's exactly like Tzidkiyo's cave. Hilu chareva, because Tzidkiyo's cave was uninhabited. Yeshiva, and the cave that our Bryce is discussing is a cave that's fully inhabited. Period. So now we know we have a machlokes. Rabbi Kiva is machmer, and when you put your Erev, even if you put it in an inhabited place, even if you put it into a city, you only get 2,000 amas from your Erev. The Rabban hold, if you put it in your city, no matter where in the city you placed it, you get the whole city and 2,000 amas around your Erev. So let's see a story. Mar Yehuda Ashkechinu Livnei Mavrachta. Now, I do not have pshat in this Gemara. I'm going to read it. I'm going to explain it to the best of my abilities, and then I'm going to tell you what I don't understand, and I'm going to ask you for help. So look at this story. Mar Yehuda Ashkechinu Livnei Mavrachta. He showed up into the city of Mavrachta. The Kamoisvi Iruvayu the Bekanishta the Biyaguba. They placed their Erev out of the city in a Besmedrash of Gubar. Their Gubar was the name of a person who this Besmedrash was called after him, and they placed their Erev in the Besmedrash. Okay? Zok the Gemara, and they wanted to travel, of course, past the Besmedrash. Amr Lahu, Rabbi Yehuda told him, Gavu Beitzvei, don't place your Erev anywhere in the Besmedrash. Let's say you're headed west. Place it in the westernmost point of your shul so that you can go much further to the west. If you put the Erev on the east side of your shul, then you're not going to be able to go so far to the west because your Erev is more to the east. But if you put your Erev in the westernmost part of the shul, then you'll be able to go to the west the maximum amount. So you can move to the west as far as possible. Amalei Rava. So Rava told him, Palgo, you're a Bal Machlekes. Because if you think about it, according to the Rabbanon, if you placed your Erev in the shul, you automatically have the whole shul. So what's the difference where in the shul you placed it? You automatically have the whole shul, and then you get 2,000 amas from the shul. You want a paskin like Rabbi Akiva, who holds that you only get 2,000 amas from where you placed the Erev, and that's why you want them to place the Erev all the way to the west? Palgo Eruvin, why are you making machlokes in Eruvin? Less the chosh lahadi Rabbi Akiva, or Palgo, you're making machlokes, but Eruvin less the chosh lahadi Rabbi Akiva. And the Mepharshim tell us because by Eruvin you go achar meikol. Eruvin is the Rabbanon. Nobody's going to be machmir like Rabbi Akiva. So why are you telling them to push their Erev to the west? Anywhere they put their Erev will be good. But what I don't understand about this is we learned 4 or 5 blot ago in middle of Amid Bays, it said that a shul is not considered a makam dira unless there's an apartment in the shul for the Shabbos. A shul is not considered a makam dira. We learned a whole bunch of different things, whether they're considered a makam dira. Now that shaila was lagabi extending the range of the city. If you have a shul that's outside your city, does that extend the range of your city? And the Gemara discussed a whole bunch of different items that extend the range of your city. And one of the items was a shul if it has an apartment that people live in. If it's not an area people live in, then it's not considered something that will extend the city. So what I don't understand is this shul, if it was only a place where people daven, then it's not considered like a city. If that's the case, maybe even the Rabbanan would be moida that you only have 2,000 amas from your area. Now I'm obviously wrong because the Gemara doesn't say that. So I would have to think either the shul was a place the shamas maybe lived in the shul, maybe had an apartment, or maybe there's a big difference between when you place an area in the shul and when you're looking to extend the city. When you look to extend the city, we won't extend the city unless someone lives in there. But when you're placing an area, even though it's not a place that people live, you still get that whole area. Just like if you place your area in a gated area. If it's a gated area, even if no one lives there, you still get that entire gated area. I mean, similar to a cave. But I don't know. I don't know. Because the Rabbanan do say that if you put your area in an uninhabitable area, you don't get the whole area. So it could be a shul has an halacha of an inhabitable area, and therefore the Rabbanan hold, if you put your area there, you automatically get the whole shul. Let's do the Mishnah because we're very beyond today's daf. Was really daf Samach Gimel. So
there's a note here that says that the sages permitted eating and drinking certain times in the base where you learn, in the Beit Knesset.
So that
No,
makes
no.
zero.
It depends. It's a base of Knesset. It depends. It's a base of Medrash. A base of Knesset, you're never allowed to eat in it.
In
It's
certain times,
only
the
in the
sage
base
is
of
allowed.
Medrash that you're allowed to eat.
Okay, so maybe it was a besmedrash. It was a place that they would eat in.
It's from
Who
Rav
said-
Yaakov Emden.
Okay, shkoyach, shkoyach. That's very important information. So come to us. It's a base dira. Okay, gewaltig. Let's see the Mishnah. Now we're going back full into Erev Chatzeres. Now we know that when you make an Erev Chatzeres, you have 3 or 4 houses that are in one chotzer. So everybody in the chotzer has to put their food together and put it in one house, and that makes it all one. And therefore we can all carry. Problem is you can't do that with a goy. So what happens if Hadar ima akum b'chotzer? What if you live in a chotzer and there's goyim there? Or somebody who doesn't believe in the Eruvin. And Rashi says kuti. It's referring to a kuti who has the status of a goy, because even though they were Megayer out of fear. And therefore they're not eating the goyim. So if you have a goy in your chutzner, you got a problem. The fact that he is not ma'ariv with you together, you won't be able to carry the chutzner. The only solution will be is if you rent by paying. If you rent his space for Shabbos, and we'll soon see that it's not that easy to get a rental contract off a goy on his property. Rabbi Eliezer ben Yaakov Eimer, la'olam einei oiser as you shnei Yisraelim oishim zelzeh. That a goy causes a problem with Neirid is only if there's at least 2 yidden there, then it causes a problem. But if there's only 1 yid living in the chutzner with the goy, it's not a problem. Again, this is very hard to explain, but the Gemara is going to make it very clear as to why there should be a difference between if there's 2 yidden there or 1 yid. Amar Rabbi Gamliel said, a story with a tzeduki. A tzeduki is a perfect Jew. He's a Jew. But he doesn't listen to all of the halachas that the Chum tell us. So
A conservative Jew.
Okay, a conservative Jew. So he was one of the residents of our Mavli in Yerushalayim. And what happened is before Shabbos, we don't have to rent from him because he's a Yid. But we asked him, if he's not part of our Erev, could he at least renounce his chelik in the Mavli so that he won't mess up the entire neighborhood? He wasn't a bad guy. He wasn't looking bedafka to mess us up. So he said, if it helps you Orthodox Jews, okay, I'll be happy to renounce my yishtamshus in the Mavli. And once he did that, our father told us, Maru, quickly, as a kalim in the Mavli. Quickly put our kalim in the Mavli, our utensils, whatever it is we would want to place in the Mavli, before he does. Because if he puts the stuff in the Mavli, it's going to show that he's recanting his big mavatals rishos. But by placing stuff out there, it means he's enforcing, he's executing, exercising his rights. And if he does, then the yeser aleichem, it'll be also for you. So if you get your kalim out there first, then it makes it irrevocable. Once you are kindness by putting your kalim there, he can no longer go put his kalim and recant and remove his hispatos. Rabbi Yehuda, no. If he puts his kalim back there, no matter when, he messes you up for the rest of Shabbos. And what Abba said was B'loshen Acher. He said, Maru v'asu tzarchechem b'mavli. Go do whatever you need to do in the mavli, whatever carrying you need to do in the mavli, do it actually Yosy v'yaser aleichem, because the moment he uses that mavli and he exercises rights in the mavli, he's taking back his isbatlas, and now that mavli becomes usher. So quickly do whatever you got to do before he cancels out his isbatlas. And I guess we could stop over here. And tomorrow at 6:45, I think we're learning, and we're learning at 9. We'll learn Mishnah Daf Samach Beis, and we'll try to push a little bit into Daf Samach.